case of the SS Lotus, France is the plaintiff and Turkey is the defendant, as put before the Permanent Court of International Justice on the 7th of September 1927. The case involved the crash of the French mail steamer the SS Lotus and the Turkish collier the Boz Court on the 2nd of August 1926 on the high seas off the coast of Turkey. As a result, 8 Turks perished and the Boz Court sank. The Lotus saved all that they could, including the captain, and when it was decided to abandon the sinking ship, they proceeded on to Constantinople, or the modern-day Istanbul.
Lieutenant Demons, the captain of the Lotus, was asked to come ashore and give evidence. On his doing so, he was arrested by Turkish officials without letting French officials know. He, and France on his behalf, argued that they had no jurisdiction to arrest him because the crash occurred on the high seas and he was on board a French-flagged ship, an issue that will be covered later. Turkey and France agreed to put the case before the PCIJ. The question put before the court was, did Turkey violate international law when Turkish courts exercised jurisdiction over a crime committed by a French national outside of Turkey? If yes, should Turkey compensate France?
France argued that jurisdiction on cases of collision on the high seas is so rarely heard in criminal courts because states tend to prosecute under their own flag. For example, the case against the captain, Lieutenant Demons, would be heard before a French court. This absence, they claim, leads to a custom on shipping collisions. This, however, was rejected by the PCIJ, and from this came what is known as the Lotus principle.
The first principle of the case was that of territorial jurisdiction. The Lotus flew the French flag, and the Boz Court the Turkish. The issue of the ship's flag is important, as the country that the flag belongs to has jurisdiction for the harm done unto it. However, because the crash occurred on the high seas between the two differently flagged ships, the PCIJ found that Turkey and France had concurrent jurisdiction. Using the Tortious but-for test, it was shown that but for the act of the French ship, the deaths would not have occurred. Hence, the criteria of remoteness was fulfilled. Thus, the Lotus was directly responsible.
A state cannot exercise jurisdiction outside of its territory unless there is a treaty agreement or custom to the contrary. This was the first major principle coming from the case. The second principle coming out of the case was that within its territory, a state may exercise however it pleases, subject to its own jurisdiction. In this case, because the harm occurred on the Turkish ship, they held jurisdiction over the case. As a result, the PCIJ found that it was within Turkey's rights to prosecute Lieutenant Demons